The liberal media is not too happy about Donald Trump's big night in Iowa. Major outlets like MSNBC and CNN flat out refusing to air the former president's victory speech after his historic win.
I can't imagine why they think that's a good thing.
Donald Trump declaring victory with a historically strong showing in the Iowa caucuses.
The projected winner of the Iowa caucuses has just started giving his victory speech. Of course, there is a reason that we and other news organizations have generally stopped giving an unfiltered live platform to remarks by former President Trump. It is not out of spite. It is not a decision that we relish.
And when they were not censoring him, pundits had some very strong words for the voters who supported him.
These are white Christians. That this is a state that is overrepresented by white Christians.
You voted for a guy who said, come, risk your lives for the Grand Wizard. Come in the snow and the sleet, because I am more important than your life.
It's that Trump has in some ways become religion for a certain section of the American electorate, and especially for evangelicals, that it's not about the virtue anymore, it's about the vice that Trump expresses.
18%. So I think we're all sitting here disgusted that they would vote for someone like this.
And how's this for spin? Democrats trying to make the case that the biggest victory in Iowa caucus history is somehow a bad thing for the former president.
First of all, 50-50 for an incumbent really sucks. This is not good for Donald Trump. I don't care how they spin it.
49% is not great for him, actually, in an electorate in a lot of these future states.
Half the people in that party didn't vote for Donald Trump. So I think that is telling. It tells you the weakness of Donald Trump.
Trump swept Iowa. No, he did not. He swept 5% of the population. Only 13% of registered Republicans in the state of Iowa, 13% of the party showed up. These are small numbers, and it's very important to remember that.
Judge, seeing that you had so many clear off-camera reactions to what we just heard, jump in there. I mean, what has happened?
I am so tired of these people being so disgusted because 73 million people voted for Donald Trump. They are disgusted. That's the word they use, that we exercise our right to vote. I am disgusted that someone is angry that white evangelical Christians voted for Donald Trump. These are people who work hard, who have the right to vote, who have the right to vote for whomever they want to. And who the hell are you to be disgusted by them? You know, I'm tired of the censorship. I'm tired of Rachel Maddow saying, you know, the projected winner, we're not gonna air what he has to say. She can't even say his name. And then you've got Tapper saying we've got an anti-immigrant, person running for president. The truth is we've got 2.5 million illegals. You can call them migrants all you want. They're illegal aliens. 500,000 are ones who are the unaccounted for, and then another 500,000 that were gotaways. So we've got 3.5 million, and we should just be happy about it. And finally, Larry O'Donnell saying the only reason Haley didn't win is because she's not a warmonger. Excuse me, she was on the board of Boeing. And, you know, these people are so hateful. And yet the United States Supreme Court is about to rule on the Biden administration. And the fact that this case, I think it's Murphy against the state of Missouri, because they literally are censoring us and suppressing the free speech. And they say Trump is Hitler. The Supreme Court is now going to decide whether or not they were involved, not just in the suppression of the 2020 election and that laptop, which we know based upon people who voted, they would have changed their vote, which would have allowed Trump to win. But it was a coordinated campaign by the Democrats, by the White House, by federal officials to impact social media, whether it's Facebook, YouTube, or X, to make sure that we are censored, that our private speech is censored.
I mean, Harold, is it a problem that, I mean, this was a historic win for the former president in Iowa last night, that if you're one of the voters in Iowa who supported him in the caucuses, that you couldn't even tune into those other networks to watch his victory speech?
Yes, I think it was a mistake not to do that. I don't like censoring. Fox, when President Biden speaks, rightly so, he's the president of the United States. You listen to the president. You have the leading candidate on the other side. The first in the nation's voting happens. I don't get that. One. Two, I think people, some of the voices that we heard Some of them I know, some of the people I know, some of them I don't know. They're just wrong. This is amateur politics you're practicing if you believe that you begin to dissect how many people voted, how many Republicans voted. I think Donald Trump is likely to be the nominee for the Republican Party. You're not going to beat him by saying that people who support him are bad people or they're not good people. And you're not going to beat him by not putting him on television. You got to have a better message. And you got to understand something, Sandra, you said at the outset in your remarks, and I think Greg did as well. And we tried to say a little bit last night. These are everyday issues that people are concerned about in this race. Our politics is broken, so as a result, our border is broken. Our government is broken from the standpoint of being able to do the basic things that people want them to do. Our schools, our neighborhoods, our workplaces, even our places of worship, which by definition means rural and urban Americans alike, their lives are a bit in disrepair. And what Donald Trump is doing, he's speaking to that. And the way you beat that is not censoring, not talking about it, not criticizing his supporters, but we need a better message. And I think we could develop one, but this is not the way to do it.
Jesse?
Remember in the 80s when the hip-hop album came out and they put that warning explicit material, parental advisory on it? It made me want to buy it. And that's what they're doing at CNN and MSNBC. It just makes you want to watch what you're not allowed to. We're big boys. We're big girls. We don't need parental control features on a news channel. And what kind of business model is a news channel where they don't take live news? That's not very smart. Jake Tapper cuts the guy off when he starts mentioning immigration, the #1 policy issue in Iowa. When you vote for a guy and he wins and then he speaks afterwards to the voters, that's like the connective tissue in democracy. You can't save democracy by censoring democracy. And then Maddow's coming out and acting like she's trying to protect the network from lawsuits to justify the censorship because, oh, someone might say something that's not true. She's like the lead hoaxer. She did the Russia hoax, the laptop, the letter, the lab leak cover-up, all of it. And then Joy. It's overrepresented by white Christians, so what? This is a majority white country, majority Christian country, overrepresented compared to the rest of the country. Okay, well, South Carolina is overrepresented by black Christians. New York's overrepresented by atheists and Jews. California's overrepresented by Hispanics. Joy, Reid, the history. These politicians have to go around to all of these diverse geographical areas and try to get a very broad coalition together. Demographically, religiously broad. That's how politics works. Now, the other guy, Trump had a bad night. Biden rigged his own primary. Biden kicked JFK Jr. out of the party and then canceled New Hampshire. This is a good night for Donald Trump.
Greg?
Can we put Joy Reid back up there? You know, I was looking at Joy Reid, and I'm thinking, you know, my brother-in-law, when we used to go to 49er games, he's a big 49er fan. He used to paint his face, you know, gold and silver. And you can tell that Joy Reid is totally in Trump's camp because she's wearing his hair. And I think that's a sign. She knew he was going to win. She wanted to be on the winning side. Look at that. That's Trump's hair.
And Clay Travis's blazer.
Yes, exactly. Look, you know, the thing what's always interesting is how little self-examination these people do. They're like Etch-a-Sketch, right? They write all these things in their little brain and create this hysteria, predict things that will never happen. Then they shake their head and it's all gone. And then they start over again. Both sides, left and right, traffic in apocalyptic pronouncements and in some cases demonization. But there's a key difference here. The liberal media's argument is all prediction, right? The right media is usually based on evidence, right? We have the crime wave, the border, the attack on science, targeting of parents, the military white supremacy hoax, domestic terrorism, the suppression of speech. These are things that you don't have to predict. They're right there. So the media will say, and all they can say is, Trump will do X, Trump will do Y, but all you got to do is go like, yeah, but look at the border crisis. Look at the fact that you removed punishment from criminals. Look at how you lied about climate to push a destructive agenda. Those aren't predictions. Those are facts.
Very good discussion.
It is.
More coming up. Greg, thank you.
You're welcome.
President Biden taking swings at the MAGA movement after Trump dominated.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.